Um, Hello everyone. It's an honor to present this talk in front of such a distinguished audience. And this talk basically, the opening talk by Steve Matheson actually helped a bit to introduce this talk, because he was mentioning in one of his slides about No Sans font, where they had to integrate multiple scripts, and he showed a slide with a Latin font and its metrics, the ascender, descender, x height, etc., along with the Khmer script, which is basically has a lot of vertical conjuncts. And one of the Indic languages called Malayalam has also a lot of vertical conjuncts. And this talk is basically an exploration into how we can attain a better font metrics to accommodate the complexities with these scripts. So we have recorded the talk already, and I hope Arthur will help us play it. Hello everyone. My name is Rajeesh. I have been using tech since 2006. It's more than 15 years on and off. And I contribute to a lot of labor-free software projects. And I also maintain a number of fonts for my mother tongue, which is Malayalam. And all the fonts that I maintain are also labor licensed, mostly in open font license. In this talk, I will explore some of the design decisions that's taken while designing the Malayalam fonts, in particular how it contrasts with the Latin typography and especially the Latin font metrics. The idea behind this talk originated in a discussion with this font's primary designer, K.H. Hussain. So this talk is mostly based on his inputs, and I hope he is in the audience today, might be able to take some of the questions that ensue this discussion. So I'll start with some background about the Malayalam script and the fonts, and then go ahead with the problem statement and give some background about the issues that we faced while designing the fonts. I'll start with an introduction about the Malayalam script and the Rachana movement. Malayalam is a mother tongue of about 45 million people in Kerala. It is more than 1600 years old and is considered as a classical language. Its script originated from the Brahmi script and is considered as Abugida, which means that the consonant-vowel combination is written as a single unit. This is the Unicode chart of Malayalam, where it encoded the basic characters in Malayalam. So about 51 characters with the numbers and some symbols used to represent fractions, etc. It is important to notice that the Unicode encodes only the basic characters in the alphabet and not the consonant-vowel combinations or conjuncts. Those conjuncts are actually represented or implemented in the font, which follows the open type specification for getting the proper shaping of the characters. Malayalam has two distinct scripts, writing systems. First one is the traditional script, which has been evolved over many centuries. And the second one is called Reformed script, which originated in the 1970s to accommodate for typewriters. So there was a proposal in the 70s by the government, and the proposed reformed script split many vowel symbols and many conjuncts. This is a simplified form, and this reformed script could be easily accommodated in traditional Latin type metrics. But when it comes to the traditional script, there was a language campaign called Rachana, started in the year 1999, advocating for traditional scripts must be used in Malayalam computing and orthography. Now, these traditional scripts require a lot more vertical space due to the stacked conjuncts. Now, the old script or the traditional script is much more popular thanks to Unicode and the web. So when we design a font for publishing as well as for usage on the web or on mobile devices, adhering to the usual Latin font metrics exerts a lot of pressure on the designer side. For the purpose of this discussion, we are going to focus on the traditional script or the old lipi, because the reformed script could usually be accommodated within the existing Latin font metrics, and that is normally used for the desktop publishing. So the original script, the traditional script, has about 51 basic characters, and they combine in various ways to form more than 900 conjuncts. The first Rachana font was designed in 1999. It was an ASCII font, a combination of about 5 to 6 different fonts to represent all these 900 plus conjuncts. That went a major modification in 2000, and in 2006 the font was adapted for Unicode and was released under GNU General Public License. You can see all the glyphs in the comprehensive glyph set of the font Rachana here, where each glyph basically is a conjunct formed out of multiple consonants and a vowel symbol. Like I mentioned, it has about 900 glyphs, individual glyphs designed to represent all the distinct conjuncts in the Malayalam traditional script. Now, after Rachana was originally released in 2006, all the glyphs have been redesigned, taking much more liberty when it comes to the typography and font metrics. This particular talk discussed some of the issues that we faced and some of the decisions that we have taken, some of the possibilities that we have identified in the Malayalam typography. And it is drastically different from the traditional Latin typography. We're going to focus on some of the conjuncts that's formed the combination of consonants and a vowel, and take some examples of it to explain the typical issues that we have faced when designing the font. Malayalam script, especially the traditional script, has an abundance of conjuncts, about 900 of them. But apart from the Roman fonts, the Latin fonts, Malayalam script has two kinds of ligatures. One is a horizontal form and the second one is a vertical conjunct or a stacked form. In this example, you can see the Latin ligature A and E together forms a distinct glyph. And similarly, the Malayalam characters sa and tha combines horizontally to form the conjunct stha. But unlike Latin fonts, which also has diacritics which can appear above base or below base, Malayalam has conjuncts that form horizontally as well as vertically. So the horizontal conjunct format you have seen earlier, and another one here is the Malayalam character ta plus sa forms a horizontal conjunct sa. On the other hand, sa joins with ta to form a vertical conjunct stha. And Malayalam has a number of vertical conjuncts which we call, for the sake of explanation here, as below base characters. For this discussion, we use this terminology called A-char and B-char to denote above base character as well as the below base character. So the above base character can always be accommodated above the baseline, filling the x height of the character. Below base characters are typically smaller in size compared to the above base characters when it is in handwriting, calligraphy, printing or digital forms. If you look at the geometry, the matrix of a particular below base character, you may see the above base character here, which occupies from the baseline to the x height. The same character, this is the conjunct pronounced as sa with a double s. So the first sa is on the top, the A-char. The second sa is the below base character, which basically occupies the space between the baseline and the descent. So the below base characters have some peculiarities, as the basic characters which is encoded in Malayalam Unicode can all be usually accommodated within the x height and the descent, which is also present in, let's say, the Latin font matrix. For example, if you see the Latin font matrix, the baseline, x height, cap height and the ascent, similar constructs are also used in Malayalam characters. For example, the first character that you see on the bottom part of the image is a vowel symbol E, then two consonants sa and u. And there you can see the descent between the baseline and the descent. There is only a little space available if we follow the Latin font matrix. When we combine multiple scripts, usually documents or typesetting is done with a combination of English language and Malayalam language. So there are Latin script as well as Malayalam script intertwined in the document. And you can see when both fonts are used in a combination, you can see the contrast. So the above base, which takes the x height, and the below base, which is much lower comparatively. And this causes a lot of problems for Malayalam because many of its conjuncts in the stacked form or the horizontal conjunct form needs a lot more space below base. The objective of this discussion is to shine light on some of the problems that we faced with vertical conjuncts and the available below base space in Latin typography and font metrics. We also present some solutions how we circumvented this problem in designing the Rajana font. So to explain the issue in detail, if we look at the below base character, which takes a lot more below base space descent compared to the Latin font metrics, there is an example of here. On the right side, the conjunct is pronounced as through with a double S and R and W. A major part of the conjunct, the below base part, is out of the Latin font metrics. And such conjuncts have multiple levels of descent depending on the shape and the character involved. So the traditional script designed by K.H. Hussain has counted about 18 different height levels when it comes to the stacked conjuncts. That's something not present in Latin typography at all. Even if you consider mathematical typesetting, 18 levels is not common. We show some examples of these below base characters with varying levels. The first three levels are explained here, with the second character being a consonant U, third character conjunct being SU, and the fourth character, which has level 3, SU with a double U. So there you can see each of these below base characters occupy a different level. This is levels 1 to 3. Levels 4 and 5 are for conjuncts str. And levels 6 to 8 are for vowel combination of an example conjunct sra. So level 6 is for sra, level 7 for sru, and level 8 for sru with W. So the base character, the first character that you see, is sa, that forms sra, sru and sru when it combined with other conjuncts and consonants and vowels. Below base level 9 has an example of sa with double sa. It's pronounced as sa with a double S. So that takes a bit more space than previous levels. Levels 10 to 12 is a combination, the vowel combination of the previous conjunct that we have seen is sa. So sa, su, su and str all take different levels. Levels 10 to 12. Now if we take the conjunct isra, when it forms, when it is combined with vowel symbols, it forms further levels 13, 14 and 15. Level 16 to 18 are an example for another character, cha. This is double cha, that is itcha, itchu and itchu. And so far as we have analyzed, these are the distinct levels of below base height that is needed to represent traditional script glyphs properly. Now, to accommodate all these different levels or characters and conjuncts with all these different levels in the below base, there are a couple of ways we can treat this below base character. The first option is to give a constant below base character width and compress the below base characters to fit in that below base height. We'll take some examples to see what that means. So, if you look at the Latin font matrix, the Roman descent is quite insufficient to represent the traditional script characters in Malayalam traditional orthography. So, if you look at the difference between the Roman descent height and the font Rachana's descent height, you can see it needs a lot of extra vertical space. And one solution is indeed to squeeze these below base characters into a single level. But then that distorts the shape of the character, which is aesthetically and functionally not acceptable. So, if you look at an example, the varying levels and a constant level on the below part of the image, you can clearly notice that the shape of the character is deformed and not very readable in small point sizes. Hence, using a constant below base height descent is not a solution for Malayalam traditional script. The second option is equalizing some near or similar heights. So the conjuncts or vertical conjuncts with similar heights could be designed to fit in certain number of heights. If we go that way, there is a possibility to reduce the number of levels from 18 to about 6. We will look at some examples of treating below base characters in this way and designing such glyphs and look at its advantages as well as disadvantages. If we equalize the levels 1, 4 and 6 into a single level, we may design glyphs like stha and sr as you have seen earlier. And equalizing levels 7 to 9 can be designed in a similar way. Levels 10 and 13 could be equalized in a similar way. Levels 11, 12, 14 and 15 can also be equalized in a similar way. Here, pay special attention to the first two conjuncts, su and su, that's with a double u on the second conjunct, that's levels 11 and 12. You can see the size of u vowel symbol is comparatively much larger because of the height adjustment. If we equalize these levels, then obviously it needs to take a little more vertical height, and that makes the vowel symbol bigger than it is necessary, particularly when we compare with the second u vowel symbol that you can see on level 12. The next option, so breaking from both these constraints, using a mono height level for the below base part or the descent, or equalizing some near level heights, we take large deviation from the Latin type matrix, and then using this liberty we design the below base characters aesthetically and functionally pleasing. Some of the examples that you see here will typically violate the traditional Latin typography, but there are strong reasons to do that I will explain. in due course. For instance, let's take a single conjunct thsa, which has a vertical form, that is double S, and design according to these three considerations: a single vertical descent, then a equalized height, and then a varying height. So take a look at number 1, 2 and 3. The first one has a stacked conjunct sa on top of sa with the same matrix. The second one is where the below base character is reduced by a fixed percentage. The third one is reduced not by a fixed percent but by a varying metric. If you look at the first one, it's immediately noticeable that even though both the above base character and the below base character is of same height and width, the below base character looks disproportionately large compared to the above base character. And this is not aesthetically pleasing. Invariably, the below base character needs to be smaller in size compared to the above base character. That brings us to the second option, by reducing the size of the below base character by a fixed percent. For example, here we have taken a value of 60% to reduce the height as well as the width of the below base character. Even though it adheres to the typographic matrix, it actually produces an unbalanced shape of the character. To remedy this, we look at the option number 3, which is reducing the below base character by a varying height and width. Here the height is 60% and the width is 70%. Now this produces much more aesthetically pleasing combination, conjunct. And not only the below base character is scaled by 70-60%, the shape of the below base character is also slightly adjusted to improve the legibility, typically at small point sizes. And that invariably produces a different type for the below base character itself. This is probably not acceptable in Latin typography, but in Indic scripts, particularly Malayalam, with a number of vertical conjuncts, this is necessary to produce a much more functional typeface. When we say that the below base character is actually, its shape is actually changed, I will zoom it and explain it in detail in the coming pictures, where the red color glyph is the above base character, the grey color glyph is the below base character, and you can notice that the below base character's thickness, the stroke width differs in various places, especially in places 1, 2, 3, and there is also at the top of the tail end. If I zoom in further, you can see the difference very clearly, where the below base character is slightly more thicker compared to the above base character. The second arch, where it is slightly more thicker. The third part, and there is also the fourth part, which is the tail end, upper tail end, which is also slightly more thicker. So usually, even if Roman typography has some conjuncts, these kinds of combining, let's say, different shapes of a same character is not necessary in Roman typefaces. So the Latin font metrics are also evolved on that basis. But the traditional script font Rajana takes liberty to deviate from such accepted norms to produce much more aesthetically pleasing and functionally appropriate typefaces. Now we look at some extreme cases where this is necessary. Some conjuncts which does not even adhere to the usual 70% width and 60% height adjustment. One example of such a conjunct is iltha. I'm not sure many of you would be able to pronounce that. That's ra and double ta. Ta plus ta combined to form utta, which is the below base character in this glyph, and ra is the above base character. Now, there are a number of words using this glyph in Malayalam like tarti, veerti, etc. We look at some extreme cases where this conjunct occurs and some of the design decisions that we have taken to accommodate these glyphs properly. If we take a usual 70% to 60% scaling that is typically applied to other below base characters, the below base character in this particular glyph, itta, actually extends much beyond the left bearing and the right bearing. This basically causes a space effect where the adjacent characters appear as if they are at much more distance from this glyph. To alleviate that issue to an extent, the only solution is to reduce the width of the below base character, itta in this case, so that it doesn't extend too much beyond the left bearing or the right bearing. And this kind of conjuncts are rare even in other Indic scripts like Devanagari, etc. And some examples that you can see here, if we use a fixed percentage like 70% to 60%, we can see that it collides with the previous and the next character. And if we extend the below base character, the left bearing and the right bearing, there is a lot of interspace before the character and after the character, and that is not very aesthetically pleasing, or it causes a jump in the readability of the text. The proper solution is indeed to reduce the left bearing and right bearing as well as to compress the below base character to an acceptable extent. So we use some unconventional reduction of the below base characters to match the readability as well as the aesthetic beauty of the font. All this background information and the problem statement and all these screenshots and images that I have shared hopefully shows that Malayalam traditional script fonts probably cannot be designed adhering to the Latin font metrics. One prominent example of this, even with a reformed script which doesn't have abundance of conjuncts, is the Kartika font, which is the default font in Microsoft Windows operating systems. The developer of the font in a discussion has mentioned that to accommodate that font to Latin type metrics, he had to do violence to the script to accommodate and match with the Latin font dimensions. And some Indic fonts do not have a lot of vertical conjuncts, but Malayalam unfortunately has a number of them. And only applying different proportions to different conjuncts formations is the only solution that we can produce an aesthetically pleasing traditional script font, but it is totally not in conformance with the Latin font metrics. The complexity here is similar to mathematical typesetting using Latin, even though it has only, let's say, the 4 levels. This image is taken from an article and credited to Daniel Ratigan. But Malayalam, as you have seen, not only 4 levels, but it has about 18 different levels. We come to the conclusion of the discussion is that there are various constraints when it comes to typesetting, especially when it comes to printing, like the line space need to be kept as minimum as possible without compromising the legibility. And Malayalam traditional script has a number of below base conjuncts, the vertical conjuncts. So keeping a fixed proportional space for below base characters is not acceptable. Similarly, a fixed percentage of reduction is also not acceptable, but it has to be a varying reduction of the height and width of the below base character to match, to keep the balance of the shape of the glyphs as well as to keep the legibility and readability of the glyph. And all these warrants deviating from the Latin font metrics. This is especially problematic when we typeset documents with Latin and Malayalam scripts, especially documents containing both English and Malayalam. Vertical conjuncts are a unique constraint compared to the Latin typefaces, and even in other Indic scripts like Devanagari do not have a lot of vertical conjuncts. And even within a font, we have difficult situations when we follow the same rule for all the vertical conjuncts. So the previous versions of Rajana font from 1999 to 2020 followed a constant level of height, which we have seen in the equalized height with a forced set of proportions. But the vertical conjuncts affect the line spacing or the leading and the point size calculation in comparison with the Latin font size. But for all the intents and purpose, Malayalam typography, especially the traditional orthography, has to deviate from the Latin font metrics because it needs different aesthetics and different composition. This can only be achieved if the font designers look beyond the current norms of Latin typography and font metrics. That concludes my talk. Now I'd be happy to take inputs and questions from your end. Like I mentioned, a lot of input for this topic also came from K.H. Hussain, who is the designer of the Rajana font. And if he is in the audience today, I hope he will also add some additional points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajesh. And I think if there are questions. Jim asks, I wonder what is the next step. I know nothing about the fonts.
Okay. Thank you for the question. The next step, we believe, is that as we have demonstrated, we are going to publicize some standard metrics that could be adhered while designing Indic fonts, and probably that proportion can be followed when developing and designing new Malayalam fonts.
Maybe I'll just unmute, just a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Arthur. So are there standing fonts that could be adapted in a way that follows what you've done? It's just so impressive, the level of detail that you went through. You don't have to go through that all over again with every new font, do you?
Indeed, but that's how where we are. When we design a new font, we have to start from the scratch, and we have a number of such fonts, let's say, which follows the traditional orthography. I think we have nearly a dozen fonts, but not all of even the traditional orthography fonts follow this level of complexity, because when we typeset texts, especially for books and particularly old text, we like to use this comprehensive glyph set of more than 900 conjuncts. But for the purpose of designing billboards or hoardings or leaflets, etc., we try to follow a reduced character set, which reduces this 900 plus characters into somewhere around 700, 600 range. So there is a reduced character set also that we propose, and some of the fonts that we have designed follow that particular reduced character set.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
I think we have time for just one more question, maybe, until it's time for Marcel's talk.
And maybe as one question, how does this actually look in traditional documents which use these scripts? So do they still also use constant distances between lines, or is that more variable? Or do they just use bigger distances? Or how does that work if you don't have the issue of combining it with English text?
So if I understood your question properly, the question is, what do we do with the leading or the line space?
Right.
So we design the font to minimize the extra leading that could arise when designing these fonts, and it's remarkably functional when we have tested it. So we have a number of old text typeset using CTEC. CTEC is very good at typesetting these complex scripts. And when we look at its readability and the interline spacing, it's fantastic. We have no complaints.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, it is time for a very quick observation. That one is by Barbara Beaton, who's watching on YouTube. She writes, and I'm just reading, the statement has been made that Latin fonts don't have different proportions in smaller sizes. And she adds, this isn't true, at least not in old metal types. Computer modern does follow the old tradition. 5 point is wider or heavier than 10 point, as I assume many here will know. So that was our comment.
Okay, thank you for that input.
You're welcome. And I think it's time for Marcel now, if you're ready. You can switch the camera on.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes,
Sorry, let's thank Rajeesh.